part of number 4 Flying Training School alongside another part of Ascent. And you can trace the development of the Hawk T2 model that we see here back to what was then British Aerospace, today BAE Systems, earlier efforts to upgrade the Hawk family during the 1980s with the Hawk 100 model with considerable airframe revisions, new avionics, new wings and improved combat capabilities. That led on to the 120 series, the Lift lead-in fighter trainer. South Africa and Australia among the export customers for the Hawk over the years. It was also built in India, the Hawk AJT, Advanced Jet Trainer, and it's very much the Hawk AJT model that led on to the T2 for the RAF. And in the cockpit, Fox Valley, the Hawk T2.
No, you keep it.
In the static park here, you can see another of the components of MFTS, the Military Flying Training System, in the form of the Grob Prefect, which provides, of course, one of the earlier stages prior to moving on through the Texan and then the Hawk T2 before the front line. And one of the main changes that they made as the design evolved was to replace that hugely stalky undercarriage, which, given that they were sometimes still operating from grass strips, could be a little fragile with much shorter landing gear.
And of course the reason it had the long landing gear was that you had to have clearance of the propeller in the propeller version. So when it was sort of take the propeller out and put a jet engine in, they left the undercarriage as was initially.
But of course a tricycle arrangement rather than tail dragger as with the piston props. The important thing here, rather like with the Mustang you might say, is that the basics of the design were right. The Jet Provost T1, while looking rather ungainly, was an excellent aeroplane. It, as I say, first flew in 1954 on the 26th of June that year in the hands of Dick Weldon from Luton Airport, which was the factory airfield for the Percival, later Hunting Percival Company. Just about a year was spent in development flying the Jet Provost T1, and then the Central Flying School at Little Rissington took it on for service trials, training instructors and developing the training syllabus. After just a month, number 2 Flying Training School at RAF Hallavington carried on those trials, and very soon it was found that students found the Jet Provost very easy to fly, and they actually went solo more quickly on the jet than they had on the earlier Piston Provost. So the all-jet training concept that the RAF had was right.
It was designed deliberately to avoid speed, which it's fair to say the Jet Provost was the butt of a number of jokes. Constant speed variable noise, doesn't have a throttle, it has a volume control, etc. This was a trainer, of course. It was all about its handling, fairly docile but still with enough bite to not let you get too comfortable that you got a little bit lax, a little bit too relaxed, and the aircraft would then do something you didn't want it to do. And of course, when this aircraft was introduced into RAF service, it was revolutionary. This whole idea of jet progress was unheard of at the time. And then, of course, the idea of the side-by-side seating as well. Yeah, very new, a huge step forward at the time.
Because, of course, the other thing that could happen other than the aircraft biting you if you got it wrong was that you got to clip round the ear from the instructor who was sitting next to you rather than behind you. Nowhere to hide. And compared with the Mark 1, the Mark 3 that we see here was more powerful. The Rolls-Royce Rolls-Royce Viper turbojet provides the power plant, one of the most successful British jet engine designs of all time. The Mark III also introduced ejector seats, strengthened wings, and the wingtip mounted fuel tanks you can see on this one to give it slightly longer range. And it came into service with number 2 Flying Training School at Silverstone in 1959, and the first all-jet training course on the Mark III graduated the following year. This is a T3A. The avionics were upgraded on this compared with the standard Mark III, and these started to be used for the training of direct entry pilots. Which means a direct entrant from school, doesn't it?
Indeed it does, yes indeed. Now you mentioned the engine, the Viper. Of course that engine has an interesting background. It was originally designed basically to be disposable. I saw in some tech journal that it was lifed at just 10 hours initially because it was built for the Jidvik, the target that was meant to be shot down. So it didn't even have much life. And the engine did take quite a bit of reworking, but I think due to its basic sound design.
It was delivered to the RAF in 1961, and it was with the RAF College at Cranwell until 66, when it went into storage. But later it was converted into a T3A model, and it served with number 1 Flying Training School at Links-on-Ouse until 1993, when the Shorts Tucano took over there completely. It was then sold into civilian hands today at Provost Base.
And the aircraft pulling up for the first of many, what we call a dairy wing over. You see the aircraft rolls in one direction but actually turns the other way. One of those classic repositioning manoeuvres named after the very famous test pilot of the 1950s, John Dairy.
I mentioned this is a BAC product rather than the hunting Jet Provost that we saw earlier in the T3A, and that's because BAC, the British Aircraft Corporation, absorbed hunting in 1960. And they took on various hunting designs. In fact, what became the BAC 111 jet airliner was originally a hunting design. And the same is obviously true of this. But we've got here what is a significantly developed version of the earlier marks. We saw the T3, then there came the T4, which had another step up in terms of the power of the Rolls-Royce Viper engine. This one, crucially, has a pressurised cockpit, so it could train at higher altitudes. But again, they further uprated the Viper, and they strengthened the wings. And the RAF ordered 110 of these Mark Vs.
And similar to the T3, the Mark III and the Mark IIIA, this of course the 5, and there was a 5A as well, again with upgraded avionics fit.
The Mark V entered service with the Central Flying School, by now stationed at Little Rissington. And that was followed by the Royal Air Force College at Cranwell and several of the flying training schools. And the JP carried on happily until the early 1990s because the Shorts Tucano had been selected as its replacement. And that was quite interesting because turboprop, obviously, instead of jet, tandem seating rather than side by side. There's some very famous display team names for those of you perhaps of a certain vintage in the audience are associated with the JP. So the Central Flying School had the Red Pelicans, number 1 flying training school had the Blades, because there's been more than one Blades display team over the years. The College of Air Warfare at Manby had the McCaws. The Gemini pair and the Swords came from number 3 flying training school, and the RAF College at Cranwell had the Poachers, and they were the last, disbanding in 1976.
And indeed this airframe itself with the Gemini pair and also the Swords during its service career. And when a certain pilot officer Palsy graduated from Cranwell after passing initial officer training, we had a fly past of 4 JP Mark V's. I still have some photos somewhere.
This one spent a long time with number 6 flying training school at Finningley, where it trained navigators, but also as part of the low-level and air defence units, specifically navigators destined for fast jet operations in those particular disciplines. You can see on this aircraft that it's not an all-over yellow colour scheme, because the dark-coloured tail fin denotes the fact that this is painted to represent the team leader's aeroplane. The Yellow Jacks, however, weren't destined to last long. Reportedly, the air officer commanding of what was still then training command wasn't keen on the aircraft's colour scheme, nor on the team name. The decision was taken for 1965 to form just one official Royal Air Force aerobatic team. Prior to that, there have been different premier teams every season. That was the birth of the Red Arrows. Their first display on the Gnat took place at a press event at RAF Little Rissington on the 6th of May 1965. Their public debut took place 9 days later at the Biggin Hill Airfair. At that stage, Lee Jones, who'd been leader of the Yellow Jacks, was still the team leader. It was a 7-ship formation. That June, the newly formed Red Arrows were part of an RAF presentation at the Paris Air Show at Le Bourget, alongside the new, relatively new, English Electric Lightning Fighters of Treble 1 Squadron. Their display, perhaps incongruously, was accompanied by a playing of Roll Out the Barrel. The legend of the Red Arrows on the Gnat was largely secured by the leadership of their second team leader, Squadron Leader Ray Hanna, from 1966 to 69, a man who went on to set the standard for formation team leading. Operated as a 9-ship formation, and they seem to almost define the spirit of the swinging 60s. For example, at the Biggin Hill show in 1968, every member of the team had an open-top MGB on loan, the British Motor Corporation, painted red to match their aircraft. They went on to display the Gnats around the world, including a US tour and many Formula 1 Grand Prix of the era, including Monaco, Zeltweg, and the Nürburgring. captaincy and then leader from 1975 to 76, described it to me as a beautiful aeroplane to fly. Very small, of course, and you almost felt that you put it on when you got into the cockpit. It was extremely responsive, very light on the controls, very precise. All the sort of qualities that turned the Red Arrows into the stuff of legend. And there, a wing waggle from Chris Heaves to finish his display on the Gnat display team's Folland Gnat T1. Wonderful there to see the Red Arrows history displayed so well, and indeed that of the Yellow Jacks.